Picture this. It's early morning, and you're woken up by soldiers banging on your door. You barely have time to grab your belongings before they force you and your family to leave the only home you've ever known. The air is filled with cries of confusion and fear. This is what thousands of Native Americans faced during the Trail of Tears, a heartbreaking chapter in American history. In this video, we will cover the heartbreaking truth behind the Trail of Tears, a forced removal that led to the suffering and deaths of thousands of Native Americans. We'll explore how the U.S. government, under Andrew Jackson, justified this mass displacement, the brutal journey west, and the devastating impact on Native tribes. We'll also uncover the little-known connection between the Trail of Tears and African American history, revealing how enslaved Africans were caught in this tragic event. Stay tuned as we expose the truth they didn't teach you in school. Greetings and welcome, history seekers. I'm Carolyn A. from GettingToTheRoots.com. Here, we're all about uncovering and celebrating your unique family history. Together, we'll explore and honor the stories that define us. Let's dive in. Who were the 5 tribes? The Cherokee, Creek, Chickasaw, Choctaw, and Seminole tribes, often called the 5 civilized tribes, had lived and thrived in the Southeast for generations. The term 5 civilized tribes was a label given by white settlers and the United States government to describe their willingness to adapt to their customs. However, this label reflected the biases of the time rather than the truth about Native cultures. It unfairly suggested that other tribes were less advanced, disregarding the diverse and sophisticated societies that existed across North America. These were not wandering groups, but established nations with their own governments, economies, and rich cultural traditions. But their fertile soil became their undoing. White settlers, hungry for cotton-rich fields, saw native lands as an obstacle to progress, a problem they believed tribal removal could solve. From Georgia to Florida, their lands were not just homes, but the heart of their identities. These tribes developed farming systems, written languages, and centralized governments, and many of their leaders worked tirelessly to coexist with settlers. White settlers saw the fertile soil of the southeastern United States as perfect for growing cotton, which was becoming a key driver of the American economy. To them, the native tribes were obstacles to progress, and their removal seemed inevitable. Some tribes even negotiated treaties to protect their territories and adopted aspects of European American culture in an effort to maintain peace. The Iroquois Confederacy, for example, had an advanced political system that inspired aspects of the U.S. Constitution, and the Pueblo peoples built highly organized agricultural communities long before European contact. White settlers, hungry for land to cultivate cotton, a booming crop in the 19th century economy, saw native lands as an obstacle to progress. The increasing demand for agricultural expansion, combined with the settlers' belief in manifest destiny, made the removal of these tribes seem inevitable in the eyes of the U.S. government. Native lands were coveted not just for their resources, but also because they symbolized barriers to what settlers saw as America's rightful growth. In the end, the native tribes' willingness to adapt, and their thriving communities, only made their lands more desirable. Their attempts to coexist were met with broken treaties and the relentless push of settlers determined to claim these territories as their own. What followed was one of the darkest chapters in American history, the forced removal of these tribes and the immense suffering that came with it. The role of Andrew Jackson and the Indian Removal Act? In 1828, Andrew Jackson was elected President of the United States. He believed that Native Americans were standing in the way of the country's growth. Jackson championed the Indian Removal Act, a law passed in 1830 that gave the government the power to negotiate treaties to relocate native tribes to lands west of the Mississippi River. While the law made it seem like the relocations would be voluntary, they were anything but. Many treaties were signed under pressure or false promises. The government assured the tribes that they would receive new lands and resources, but these promises were rarely kept. The Cherokee Nation fought back by taking their case to the Supreme Court. In 1832, the court ruled in their favor, declaring that they had the right to their land. However, Andrew Jackson ignored the ruling, famously stating that the court could not enforce it. The Forced March. A story of survival? By the late 1830s, the government began forcibly removing tribes that refused to leave. Soldiers rounded up families, often with no warning, forcing them out of their homes. They were placed in holding camps where conditions were terrible, with little food, shelter, or medical care. From there, the long march west began. The journey was brutal. Native people walked hundreds of miles on foot, enduring freezing winters and sweltering summers. They had few supplies, and starvation and disease were rampant. Entire families were wiped out by illnesses like dysentery, smallpox, and pneumonia. For every step they took, they left behind loved ones who could not survive. Among the tribes, the Cherokee suffered greatly, losing more than 4,000 people during their forced removal. This immense suffering led to the name Trail of Tears, a reflection of the heartbreak and loss experienced along the way. What was the impact on African Americans? The Trail of Tears also intersected with African American history. Some members of the 5 tribes owned enslaved Africans, and these individuals were forced to march alongside their native owners. The Seminole tribe in Florida had long provided sanctuary to runaway enslaved Africans, and they became allies in resistance against the U.S. government. This shared history created a complex relationship between African Americans and Native Americans. Many African Americans today can trace their ancestry to these tribes, but the legacy is bittersweet, shaped by both solidarity and enslavement. The Trail of Tears left a lasting scar on the Native American communities. The tribes lost not only their land but also parts of their culture, traditions, and identities. Once they reached Indian territory, they had to rebuild their lives from scratch, often in unfamiliar and hostile environments. The effects of the Trail of Tears is still felt today. Native communities continue to fight for their rights, lands, and recognition in the face of ongoing challenges. The story is a reminder of the resilience of those who endured this tragedy and the cost of greed and expansion. The Trail of Tears is not just a story about the past. It is a lesson about the consequences of injustice and the strength of those who resist it. As we reflect on this history, we honor the lives lost and the resilience of the African and Native American people. That's a wrap, history seekers. If you found this story compelling, explore more untold truths in our full playlist. The 400-Year Journey from Africa to America. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe and join our email list to stay connected. Thank you for watching. Peace and love.